Hello everyone, it's noon and we'll get started with our webcast today. I'm Jim Lewis and I'll be working with you here. And there are people still arriving. If you have already downloaded your handouts using the link at the bottom of the page, you can take notes. And if you haven't done that yet, it's not real imperative that you do it and you'll be able to do it later. This program is being recorded and it will be posted to YouTube, and I will send out a notice telling not only how to access it on YouTube for those people that either want to review it or who might have missed it, but also for those of you who are here today and the system does record that you start at a certain time and end at a certain time. And so for you to claim a PDU for the program, I'll send you with that notice a registration code so that you can get on the PMI website and claim the 1 PDU credit that you're entitled to. And it is registered with them already, so there won't be any problem with it. While we're waiting for just a moment, let me just tell you a little bit about NLP and how it got started. Actually, Richard Bandler and John Grinder came up with this approach back in the 70s, and of course it has evolved over the 40 years since that time. They originally wrote a 2-volume set called The Structure of Magic, and the reason they called it that is because when you know how to make changes in people's behavior, it's almost like magic. Unlike all the old archaeological excavation approaches that were originally developed by Freud, which took a lot of time and in many cases didn't get very good results. And so NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, has been around for a long time. It has never made its way into mainstream psychology on a wide-scale basis, and part of that is because a lot of people don't think that the claims are valid and they don't bother to check them out. It's like all paradigm shifts. It takes time for people to adopt those. So let's see what this means, what this whole NLP thing really means. You see a bunch of words here. Essentially what Grinder and Bandler were trying to convey was that we are programmed to behave in certain ways using linguistics or language, and that programming is done through the neuronal pathways in the brain. And all of this has been demonstrated and proven pretty much by neuroscientists. We can do things now that we couldn't do back in the 70s. We have functional MRIs and EEGs combined so that we can look at brain scans and we can see how the brain lights up as people think about certain things. And we also know that the brain is much more plastic than we thought it was way back in the 70s. We know it rewires itself, and so part of the trick is to know how to actually consciously rewire your brain. You're doing it all the time. You just don't have conscious control over it, and NLP offers ways of changing our programming so that we can improve our performance. You'll notice that I changed the title of the program. Originally I called it Using NLP Methods to Get Better Results in Projects, but I decided I was going to make this course a program, part of the project management certificate program, and also the general management certificate that we're offering at NC State University. And so I chose to call it increasing or getting high performance at work in general. And I've been teaching NLP for quite a long time. I got certified back in the 80s, and I've never taught a full-blown NLP program for managers. I've always woven different bits and pieces into some of the programs that we do. For example, our How to Communicate, Influence, Negotiate program has some components in it, as do our leadership skills programs and our How to Be a Highly Effective Project Manager. So all of these have some of these techniques in them. So this will be a standalone program at NC State eventually. Right now this is just a webcast to get you acquainted with it and give you some of the basics so that you can use these and then decide if you'd like to go any further with it. Now, one of the basic premises of NLP is that we take in information through the 5 senses. We all know that. However, what they found that was really interesting, and you see this in education nowadays, is that people have preferences for whether they do this in a visual, auditory, or kinesthetic mode. Kinesthetic meaning both emotions and feelings, sensory or tactile feelings as well as emotional feelings. And I think about 60% of Americans tend to be fairly visual, and so they prefer to see information and take in information through sight. Maybe about 20% are auditory and another 20% are kinesthetic. And while smell and taste are not dominant systems, smell is a particularly strong memory jogger. So, for example, if you smell a cigar and you used to know someone that smoked cigars, it may remind you of that person. Or you smell a cologne or perfume and you knew someone that used to wear that fragrance, and so it reminds you of them. I grew up in farm country in North Carolina, and the smell of cut grass, which people are making into hay, takes me back to the days when I used to help my uncle on his farm, and so it is a good memory jogger. Just to think about that, or get you started thinking about how this works, think about coffee. Just think about coffee, and notice what you see, feel, hear, taste, or smell in your head. Some of you may actually have the sense of coffee, or the aroma jogs your mind. When I was a kid, we had percolator coffee makers, and so we would hear the sound of percolating coffee. Now we have the drip coffee makers, and they make a different sound, and I expect young children get anchored to that sound differently than we did when I was a kid. So if you think about something like this, or you think about being on the beach, it evokes certain sensory experience in your head. And we'll continue with that and see how that works. Now, it's not that we don't use all of the senses, we do, but we do tend to have preferences for one or more of them being dominant. Usually people have a couple of them that they like, and so they'll use some combination of them. And they represent ideas, memories, and imagination in their heads in some combination of them. It turns out that if you want to really remember something, if you can find a way to store a representation of it in all of the senses, it will be the most powerful memory that you can possibly have. So you will find that that's a good way to keep your important information. Let's see another way this works. Let's begin by having you think of something that you are certain you did yesterday, something that you absolutely know you did yesterday. And just notice what's in your head. Just notice the images or the sounds or the experience that's in your head as you think about something that you know you did yesterday. And I'm deliberately being quiet to let you think a bit. All right, now, think of something that you might have done yesterday but you did not do. Think of something you might have done but you didn't do. Now, what are the differences between those two thoughts? One of the things you're going to notice is that the thing that you're certain of you did yesterday may look different in your head. The picture you have might be brighter. The sounds you remember might be more crisp. And the thing that you might have done yesterday but you didn't do may be fuzzy or dim or small, or it may locate a different point, different part of the screen of your visual memory in your head. But there will be some difference between the two. This is kind of interesting because how do you know for sure that something happened? If you've ever had the experience of dreaming something and waking up and that dream was so vivid that you had to really question yourself about whether or not it took place or whether it was just a dream, you know what I'm saying. It turns out that the mind actually cannot tell the difference between imagination and reality. And we know this because if we have people wired up to EEGs or have them hooked up to or in an fMRI machine, and we pay attention to their brain scans as they, say, play a musical instrument, and then we look at those same brain scans as they imagine playing that musical instrument. It turns out that the very same circuits fire. And so the mind really can't tell the difference between imagination and reality, and that's why athletes have been taught for a long, long time to actually rehearse plays. And a study was done way back in 1960 that showed that if they took a team of basketball players and they split them into thirds and they tried to distribute them equally according to skill, and a third of them were sent to the gym every day and they practiced shooting free throws, and they kept records of the performance improvement over time, and they did this for 30 days. Another group just went to the gym and sat and imagined doing free throws for an hour, and they recorded their actual performance at the end of that 30 days and at the beginning. Third group didn't do anything. They just did whatever they wanted to. It turned out that the people that practiced improved their skills by about 20%, and the ones that imagined improved theirs by about 19%. In other words, there was no statistically significant difference in the improvement between the two, which is pretty impressive. And we know, as an example, a fellow named Milton Erickson, who was one of the people that NLP was patterned after to start with, he had polio and was paralyzed when he was about 17 years old. And he noticed that as he laid in bed feeling a little sorry for himself that he couldn't do things that he used to do, and he remembered climbing trees and things of that nature, he realized that there were muscles in his body that were actually being activated just by his thinking about them. And he actually practiced mentally walking again and did enable himself to walk again. And so this is really important. What we do with the mind can truly make major changes in the body. There are a lot of studies that are showing that the so-called placebo effect, which is that the brain or the mind thinks that something is possible, is almost as effective as the drugs we give people to cure diseases. And can't make any money off of that, of course, but it's a pretty important finding. Now, continuing to talk about the images in your head, if you just talk about visual images for a moment, they can be bright or dim, sharp or fuzzy, close or distant, detailed or very sparse, in color or grayscale. And these are called submodalities. So if visual is a mode itself, then all these nuances of the mode are called submodalities. Think about what they would be for auditory and feeling. Let's think about auditory. You have really loud or really soft sounds. You have harsh grating sounds, or you have more mellow tones. You have those that sound way off in a distance, and you have others that seem close by. And those are some of the submodalities of auditory. In terms of feeling, we talk about feeling cheerful or sad, happy, and so on, hurt, anxious, nervous, all kinds of different feelings. The feelings can be very strong or they can be very mild. They can feel sharp and penetrating, or they can feel more generalized. And so the way we code our memories and our feelings, our imagination, is an important thing to pay attention to, because it gives us some clues as to how we can change some of the behavior that we exhibit, including things like habits and behaviors like procrastinating. It can show us how to access a state of excellence, how to get motivated when we're faced with a task that we really don't want to do. And I'm going to show you a couple of those things as we go along, and these are covered in detail in our complete 3-day program that we're going to be doing. Now, there's something important about the way we imagine things that I even didn't think about until sometime recently, because If you visualize yourself doing something and you see an image of yourself, we call that a dissociation. On the other hand, if you are imagining something and it's as though you're in the experience of it, seeing out through your eyes and seeing the world around you, you are associated into the experience. Now, one of the ways to learn to shoot baskets or to play a musical instrument is to imagine yourself doing it. The trick is that the practice is most effective if you are associated into the image so that you are actually experiencing playing that instrument as opposed to seeing yourself playing the instrument. Now, on the other hand, if you've experienced some kind of trauma, it's less painful to see yourself in a dissociated way than it is to go back through it in an associated way, because if you go back through it in an associated way, you will actually relive it. You'll relive the trauma, the experience, and so on. And so both these things have usefulness. And for some of you, you may have experienced such severe trauma at some point in time that most of your memory is of yourself in a dissociated way as a way of protecting yourself against additional trauma or harm or whatever it may be. And so it's important to you to recognize which of these you prefer. Now, this woman is imagining herself becoming a vet, and she's seeing herself being a vet, and that's okay. That's the dissociated approach. But ultimately, it will become much more real to her if she can associate into it and see herself, experience herself actually performing the functions of a vet. And so you need to use both approaches, but if you want to imagine developing a skill, you want to associate into that experience. If you're trying to remember a traumatic sort of thing, you may want to be dissociated from it. I mentioned a moment ago that brain scans show what part of the brain is active in thinking various ways, and they also reveal that the brain rewires itself. They've even gone so far, I read a blog by a psychologist in England recently, they've gone so far as to be able to show memories being created in the brain as it happens, because they can see these circuits light up and so on. So there's really some fascinating things going on now that are teaching us how to actually help people get rid of trauma, or the results of trauma, that is. And we'll do some of this ourselves. Now, one of the things that is really interesting is that our eyes give us clues as to what sensory system we're accessing at any given time. Now, this woman, if you look closely at her eyes, is looking slightly up and to her left. Now, this is a visual remembered access, as we call it, and I remember this by always paying attention to the fact that a remembered access is on my right-hand side when I'm facing the person. So V subscript R is the way we code this, and so visual remembered is on the right side, my right side. And it turns out that we have 3 visual accesses, 3 auditory accesses, and 1 kinesthetic access. And the table that I've got on the page here shows you where the person's eyes will be when you're facing them and they are accessing these different sensory modes. Now, let's take a look at these. Let's start with the visual, and notice on the right-hand side, there's the one where the person is looking up to their left, which is on your right-hand side, so that's visual remembered. And if I were to ask you to think about your living room or your automobile or your significant other, and what does that person look like, there's a good chance that your eyes are going to go up to that side. And when that happens, you have a visual remembered picture in your head. Sometimes left-handed people are reverse wired to this, by the way. So you have to pay attention. If a person is left-handed, do they go to their left to remember, or do they go to the right-hand side? And they'll go to the right-hand side for both visual and auditory remembered if that's the case. So they're reverse wired. But there are not too many of those people around. I find that most people are wired pretty much conventionally, no matter whether they're left-handed or right-handed. And it turns out that this wiring is pretty much universal around the world, with one or two exceptions. And I had heard at one point in time that some Korean people seem to be wired slightly differently, but I don't know if that held up under scrutiny. I haven't seen anything on this in a while. All right, now what do we mean by visual constructed? If I were to say to you, imagine changing your room around, imagine rearranging the furniture, you may first go up to remember to see what it looks like in your head at the moment, but then you'd move over to the constructed side, which is up to my left, your right, and then form a new image. The first time I saw someone do this, it was an interior designer, and I asked him to construct an interior in his head that he had not yet designed. And it was interesting to me because I saw his eyes go up to the remembered side and then over to the constructed side. And I said, did you go through your memory banks and scan them and then form a composite? And he said, yeah, that's how you do it. And I thought that was interesting because it told me something about the actual process by which a person designs something. They go through a selection of memory banks and pull out some bits and pieces and synthesize something new from them. Now you notice that in the center it says this is either remembered or constructed. This is staring out into the distance and sort of defocusing. And what you'll notice if you see someone do this is it's like they've gone into a mild trance, and actually they do. This is what we do when we daydream and we go into that mild sort of hypnagogic state. And oftentimes the images we get when we do this are not very crisp, but it doesn't really matter. They are there. And so you can visualize using either of these modes. I'm noticing some power glitches here, and we're not having a storm, but they may be at some distance. So if this line drops, my apologies, but I don't think it will. There's no rumbles in the distance that I can hear. I'm just noticing these little glitches. Okay, let's look at auditory. And again, we have the very same right side, left side, except that the eyes go horizontal left and right now. And so if you remember the sound of something, if I say to you, do you remember the sound of a song, or do you remember what someone's voice sounds like? The chances are good that you'll go over to a remembered side, and some of you will actually hear that sound in your head. Others of you won't hear very good sounds, or in the case of the visual stuff, you won't see very crisp images, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Over on the left-hand side, you have auditory constructed. You're trying to think how to say something. Sometimes a person for whom, let's just say, English is not their primary language, if they're trying to figure out how to say something, they'll go over to remembered and they'll think about it, think about the vocabulary and that sort of thing, and then they'll go over and try to construct the expression. Or if you're trying to figure out how to tell somebody something and you don't know quite how to put it into words, you may go over to construct it. Now, I don't know how many of you talk to yourselves or have internal dialogue, but if you do, you'll find that you are looking down to your left. So your eyes are going down to your left, and if I'm looking at you, that would be on your right-hand side. And that's contrasted with kinesthetic. You notice that the kinesthetic axis is on the other side, and the person's looking down to their right, which is on my left-hand side. So if you're talking to yourself, chances are good you'll be over there on that right-hand side looking down, and if you're looking at accessing your feelings, you'll be on the other side. Our language reflects this. When people are accessing visual images, they talk about things are looking up, or things are looking down if they're feeling bad. And we'll see that as we look at some of these next slides. Now, here's a woman who is clearly doing a visual remembered. Her eyes say she's remembering these scenes. You notice that some of them are fuzzy and some of them are sharper, and this is absolutely the way we do it. The flowers tend to be a little fuzzy, a little hazy up there near the top. The windmill, on the other hand, is a little bit sharper. The beach is a little bit fuzzy. She's probably been to all these places, or she's seen pictures of these things, and so she's going through visual remembered. These two women, on the other hand, are feeling a bit down. Notice that the shoulders are slightly slumped. In one case, well, actually in both cases, the head's slightly tilted as well as the eyes going down. And these are very subtle. It takes a little bit of time to get to the point where you can tell that the eyes are actually down and not just looking sort of straight ahead. But you can see them, and some people get good enough at this that they can actually tell what direction the eyes are going in even when a person's eyes are closed, because the eyeball moves up under the eyelid and you can actually tell where they went. So what does this stuff matter? Well, it helps you to understand how people are thinking, and that has importance for you in terms of communication as well as rapport, conflict resolution, influence, and so on. So let's look at a couple of examples here. Notice what this fellow says. That sounds great. It's music to my ears. Now, what that says is he's processing this information in an auditory way. If you notice that he uses a lot of auditory access, then you can make a fair guess that he tends to prefer the auditory system to the visual or kinesthetic system. What that says is if he was a manager or someone that you reported to, he would probably prefer that you just tell him about things than that you want him to read a lot of stuff. And so he wants quick auditory information instead of long, drawn-out visual stuff. On the other hand, the visual person, like this person, may want to see a lot of charts, graphs, photographs, may want to read stuff. He says, it looks bad to me. And the other woman says, I see why you think that. Notice that she responds to him in the same sensory system. This is important because this helps you to establish rapport with someone. And if you want to influence, negotiate, or lead someone, you need to establish rapport with them in order to do that. So by matching the sensory systems they're in, you find that it'll help you. If you were in a sales situation and you were trying to sell someone an automobile, let's say, or a home, and you know that they're very visual, then you emphasize as much visual stuff as you can. Now, if you're not real sure where they're coming from, what you try to do is you try to use all three of the modes, and that way you're safe. You're safer. So the trick to this is that we tend to communicate in our own preferred system, and if it doesn't match the client, then we'll have a disconnect there. So that's why this stuff becomes important. Now, another way that we have rapport with people is to match postures and so on. You notice that this looks like a little group sort of counseling session here, and you notice that three of these people are leaning forward in a very similar posture to the guy in the checkered shirt, and it looks like they are in pretty good rapport with him. Actually, four of them are in pretty much the same posture, and the woman who has her hand on his shoulder is slightly tilted forward, so she might be also matching fairly well. You see this happen all the time in social events. You'll see people in a party, for example, who are having a good time, and they'll be standing matching each other or mirror matching. Sometimes you'll see a person sort of putting all their weight on their left foot, and the person they're talking to is putting their weight on their left foot, so they're tilted in opposite directions, but they are matching in a sense, okay? And so, again, this is important if you're a leader or manager to know how to get rapport with people, and if you're negotiating with someone, it's important. AT&T at one time trained their telephone operators when or their customer service people not to do like that guy at Comcast that you've just heard about probably on the news, who wouldn't let the guy cancel his contract with them. But somebody calls into AT&T with a complaint about their phone service, and they're pretty upset. And what they taught the operators to do was to establish rapport with the person by responding with the same intensity of sound, but with friendliness. And so they matched the sort of the intonation and the volume, but they matched it with friendliness as opposed to being upset, because that would just escalate everything. And it turns out that once you've got the person in rapport, you can then start to scale that down a bit and get them calmed down, and then you can attack the problem. Now, if this is a woman selling real estate, which is what this clip was about, do you think she sold this guy? He doesn't look very convinced to me. His posture is just saying, well, you know, I hear you, and that sounds okay, but I'm not real sure about it. And I could be wrong about that. One of the things that we learn about NLP and body language is that we have to calibrate to be sure what someone's body posture means. And so you can't just follow these rules about, well, if somebody's got their arms across their middle, it means they're closed off. No, it could just be that they're comfortable. So you have to check things out to find out what's going on. Okay, I promised you that I was going to give you a couple of techniques here that you could use, and I know that some of you will find this inconvenient to do, so you may have to do this later. And I'm going to place a recording of this script on a website and give you a link to it so that you can download this and do it in privacy if you happen to be in your office where you can't do this. But what you need to do is be standing as I walk through this process with you. And this is a pretty incredible process. And let me tell you what it's for. If you're going into an interview situation, for example, and you want to come across as being your best and full of confidence and self-assurance, then here's a way to access that at will. And you begin by standing up and remembering a time when you were very confident about something. You may have just had a major success at something, or you've just delivered a speech and people were just enthusiastic about it, and you're feeling really good about yourself. And what you want to do is actually relive that moment. Again, looking out from your eyes and seeing what you saw and hearing what you heard and feeling what you felt at that time. And I'm going to pause here for the benefit of people who are actually doing this. So try to get a good, crisp image in your head. Now, as you feel the confidence building in you, imagine that there is a circle of light, a colored circle on the floor, going completely around your body. It goes around your feet. You can make it whatever color you like. And when you have a very strong feeling of confidence, step out of that circle and leave those confident feelings back there inside the circle. All right. Now you're standing outside the circle at this point. I want you to think about a specific time in your future when you want to have that same feeling of confidence. Perhaps you have to give a presentation to someone, a group, a client, your boss, or you're going for a job interview, or you're trying to sell something. See and hear what will be there just before you want to feel confident. It could be the environment itself, it could be certain people, but try to see all those things. And as soon as those cues are clear in your mind, step back into the circle and feel those confident feelings again. And now imagine that the situation is unfolding around you in the future with these confident feelings fully available to you. So you're linking these two together now. Now let's check the results. Step out of the circle again, leaving the confident feelings behind. And now once you're outside the circle, take a moment and think again of that upcoming event. What you should find is that you'll automatically recall the confident feelings, which means that you have pre-programmed yourself for that forthcoming event, so that when you enter that event, you can access these feelings. Now, you can also anchor this by, when you're inside the circle, thinking about the future and having the confident feelings, you can just squeeze your wrist with your thumb and your forefinger. We call that anchoring. And you can't do this with one trial. You have to do this a number of times so that you can then squeeze your wrist and bring back those feelings of confidence. It's interesting that we have all been anchored to respond in certain ways by certain stimuli. For example, you may recall when you were a kid, your mom or dad had certain expressions that they used when maybe they were on your case about something, and just the tonality or the way they express themselves, if you hear them use that tonality and express themselves that way, brings back those same feelings that you had when you were a child. And you might be like a friend of mine who's 50-some years old, and he said, I don't care how old you are, when you go back home, your mom's little boy. And this guy was a lieutenant colonel in the Special Forces and a great big strapping 6'6" guy, but his mom could still anchor those feelings in him. Incidentally, there is an interesting thing about this for those of you that run groups. If you meet in the same conference room, same location every week, and you're trying to solve a problem of some kind, and every time you go in there you get stuck, go somewhere else, because what happens is the physical layout of the room will actually cause people to get back into the mental state of being stuck as soon as they walk into that environment. So that's an environmental anchor that happens. Another one, if you're negotiating with someone and you want to have the home advantage, then you want to do it in your own office where you can access a feeling confidence about your turf. But if you want it to be more balanced, then you probably should go to neutral territory so that neither of you has any home field advantage, as we say. So these anchors can be very, very important to you. And a lot of them, and they can be in any mode. They can be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. But you can use the physical anchors by squeezing a finger or your wrist or something of that nature, or putting your own hand up on your shoulder and just touching your shoulder. And that way you can access the feeling of confidence or assurance whenever you need it. Okay. If any of you have any questions about any of this stuff later on, send me an email at lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com, lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com, and I'll be glad to try to answer your questions. Here's a very useful technique that you can use if you have had a bad experience somewhere. It could be a time when you were embarrassed, you could have been hurt by someone, you could have had a big knockdown, drag-out fight and got upset about something, and you'd like to sort of get over this unpleasant memory. I mean, running it through your head isn't doing you any good. It just keeps you feeling bad. And if you really want to recover, for example, if you had a fight with somebody and the next day you need to go into a situation with a clear head and you're trying to get rid of the memory of that bad experience the day before, this technique can be useful. Now what you do is watch a movie in your head of the problem situation. In other words, rehearse it. Go back through it in your mind. And then select a piece of music that is uplifting, something that cheers you up when you see it, or when you hear it, and run that movie again with that music playing in your head. Now you can do this. The mind can actually do two different modes at the same time, the visual and auditory, that doesn't get in the way of anything at all. And then check what happens. What you should find is that as you play this upbeat, cheerful music, the feeling of hurt that you experience when you run that movie starts to diminish. Now, in both cases where you're doing the state of excellence or you're trying to go through this movie music, you need to do this a number of times, because one time is probably not going to get it sufficiently to be worthwhile. But if you do it several times, it'll actually, it's like practice makes perfect. So, and of course that's not quite true. Perfect practice makes perfect. If you keep making mistakes when you practice, you'll just get better at making mistakes. So same thing is true here. If you try this and it's not working, then you might want to try a variation of it. Or you might actually want to sit down with some cheerful music playing if you have trouble running the music script in your head. Okay? So those are a couple samples. I want to tell you now, I didn't put a slide in for this. I want to tell you about, and I'm going to back up here for just a moment. I want to tell you about how you can change habits. If you can imagine yourself doing something and doing it really well, and there's something that, and you like it, you get very turned on to do this, it's some activity, sport, hobby, whatever it might be that you really enjoy, and you're faced with doing a task that you really don't want to do, but it needs to be done, and you'd like to feel a little bit better while you do it, you can actually look at the difference between how you code those two experiences. So if you look at the images that you have in your head of something that you really, really enjoy, something that you're automatically turned on to do, and then you notice what you experience when you think about doing the other thing that you don't want to do, the chances are pretty good that the other one is dim, it could be dull colors, it could be have some negative feelings associated with it and so on, whereas the one that's positive probably has good feelings, and you might even notice a change in your physiology as you think about it. You're more erect in standing up, and your head might be up higher, whereas if it's a bad thing, something you don't like, your head might be down. And if you will first get the positive coding in your head, and then think about the other activity that you don't much want to do and code that in the same way. Make the image brighter, larger, try to get into the positive feeling. You can actually learn to motivate yourself to do things that you don't particularly want to do. And all of these things take some practice, but they are totally possible for almost all of us to do. One of the premises of NLP is anything that's possible for one human being is possible for all others, unless there is some handicap in some way, some physiological thing or some mental problem that makes it difficult for them to do it. And one of the things that I have concluded over the years is that we see these people that are called savants. And as an example, there's a fellow that can take the 13th root of a number and tell that to you in about 70 seconds. And people say, oh my, or you saw Rain Man, the movie some years ago, and that's a real person. And you just marvel at what he could do, memorizing an entire book of phone numbers and things of that nature. And I'm convinced that what's possible for those people is possible for anyone else if we know how to do it. And so one of the things NLP does is pay attention to how people do something that is quite expert, and then they try to teach that approach to everyone else. That's called modeling. Pardon me, I've got a tickle in my throat here. So let me tell you just a couple minutes about what the course is about. I've given you just a brief sampling here of how you can apply NLP to improve your own performance. You can also help people in your teams improve their performance. So there's definitely two aspects to this thing. One is improving yourself, and one of them is helping other people improve themselves. And this is going to be the new seminar in our certificate program in project management at NC State University. And we also have a general management certificate that we'll be reviving next year, and it'll be an elective in both of those certificates. If you'd like a brochure of this particular seminar, the tiny URL PSPVFZS is what you want to go to get that brochure. We won't be offering the live course until 2015 because the fall schedule is already out, but we will be offering an online version starting on August the 18th, and it goes for 6 weeks. You put in about 3 hours a week, and all the scripts will be downloadable so that you can practice them away from your computer and put them in your iPhone or whatever. And there will also be live coaching sessions every 2 weeks throughout the 6 weeks that this course lasts. And this course price is normally $14.95, and for the first 20 people to enroll in it, you'll get a $500 discount from that price. When you go to register, you put the code NLP intro in, and that'll give you the automatic $500 discount up until 20 people have enrolled. And the registration link is LKVQFHG, LKVQFHG, and just put tinyurl.com in front of that. And you can pay using PayPal, either PayPal itself or with your credit card. And if you happen to have a PayPal account, you may be able to take 6 months to pay the fee if you're paying it out of your own pocket. But it will count as part of the certificate programs, both the project management and the general management certificate. And this is a really great course. It's going to go a lot further than what I was able to do here in this brief time. And you'll also get a free copy of the book NLP at Work, which will give you some follow-up reading material. All my online courses are narrated PowerPoint. It'll be just like what you're experiencing right now. You're hearing me talk and you're seeing the slides, and I will be walking you through all the material and explaining it to you and giving you some assignments to do so that you can practice this stuff. It works best if you take the course with a friend, but if you don't have someone signed up to take it with you, you can still practice with a friend. When I was taking my NLP training back in the 70s and 80s, that's what we did. We'd get together in groups of 3s usually, and we would practice all these different techniques. A lot of people like to call that role playing. I prefer to call it skill practice because that's essentially what it is. And so you'll find that over time you can pick up these skills and that they'll be useful. You know, we talk about this as being NLP at work, but it actually is something that you can use in every aspect of your life. So that's it. Thank you so much for being here. I didn't know exactly how long this is going to take. We're about 10 minutes ahead of ourselves, and that's okay. You'll still get a PDU for this if you need one. And hopefully this has been a good use of your time. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule and being here and supporting us with our programs. And if you have any questions or need anything, again, write to me at lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com, and I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you have. Join me on LinkedIn and Facebook if you are a member of those, and send questions to me if you have them, and thank you so much.